What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Devin, and in today's video we are going to be talking about how to get those sharp, crispy, juicy photos you want to see and you want to post on Instagram, and you just want it to look good. And that's what we're going to be talking about. So whether you are just getting into photography, whether you want to shoot better stuff, like I said, for your Instagram, you want to shoot family portraits at the next family gathering, hopefully this video will help you guys. And with that said, let's jump into it. So there are a ton of different variables when it comes to shooting sharp photos. Everything from shutter speed, focal length, aperture, the speed of your subject, the speed of you. But if I really break it down as simple as possible, really it comes down to two main things. Now, within those two things, there are more things, of course, that's how it works. But I wanted to try to keep this video as simple as possible. We'll get a little bit nerdy here and there.
Nerd alert!
But you should be able to apply everything we talked about in this video to drone photography, phone photography, action cams, or even cameras like this. It all has the same principles, and so hopefully you can find it helpful. So you can run around on your phone or on any camera you have and run around and use auto all day, and the camera will probably do pretty well. But that's not what this video is about. We're going to dive in a little bit deeper, and we're going to start taking control of our photos and getting those sharp photos that we want. So the first step of that is to know the basics of your exposure triangle. And your exposure triangle consists of aperture, ISO, and shutter speed. And in this instance, our main focus is going to be on shutter speed. So we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But the other two elements, aperture and ISO, are important to know at least the basics of, whether you want to control them or not, at least to kind of know what they're doing within the camera as you're shooting photos, and to understand why your photos may or may not be turning out as sharp as you want them to be, and how to get those sharp photos. So aperture refers to the opening of your lens to your sensor, and it's marked by numbers like f1.8, f3.5, f11, f16. And the smaller the number, like f1.8, means a larger opening through the lens to allow more light to hit your sensor. And that's going to allow for more light, brighter images. A lot of people use it for that depth of field, that blurry background. Shooting at that lower f-stop number, f1.8, f2.8, you're going to get that nice, what they call bokeh or bokeh. And it's that nice background blur. The higher the f-stop number, you're going to have more in focus, and you're going to actually sharpen the images to a certain point. Once you go too far, your lens can actually get soft, and that's due to diffraction, I think they call it. And that's due to different distortions within the lens. So just knowing those limits within different lenses, as you get better at photography, you'll know those limits. But that's the general use of aperture, is to allow for more light and to get that background blur. And a lot of aperture is really a creative decision. So you can choose how you want your images to look and then use it to control light. So the higher the f-stop number, like f8 or f11, means there's going to be a smaller opening through the lens, which means less light, but more is going to be in focus within the frame. And so this is more or less a creative decision on what look you want and also how much light you need in your image. All right, so side note, this is going to get a little bit nerdy. Aperture will also affect different lenses differently, which might go without saying, but typically, for example, a wide angle lens is going to have more in focus throughout the whole frame anyway, unless you're really up close to your subject, whereas it might be hard to still get that background blur that you're looking for, even if you go down to f2.8. That's why you really can't get that shallow depth of field and background blur when shooting on GoPros or action cams, because those are all wide angles. So when I shoot real estate, I shoot on a wide angle lens, and I actually bump my f-stop up to like f8 or f9, and that keeps everything sharp and in focus throughout the whole frame, and there shouldn't be anything blurry. But then if you're using a longer lens, you're gonna have more blur due to compression and even those higher numbers. So f4.0, you might still get a lot more blur in that shot at 200 than you will at 16 millimeters, just because of the lens. So that's a little bit more nerdy. If you guys want more information on stuff like that, then leave a comment down below, and maybe I'll make a more in-depth nerdy lens video or nerdy photography video that goes more into the nitty-gritty. But let's get back to taking sharp photos. All right, so the next thing in the exposure triangle is your ISO, and that is gonna be your digital sensitivity to light. As it gets darker, or if you need more light in your image because you have a higher aperture number, like f8, then you might need to bump your ISO number up. And that's gonna introduce more light to your picture, but it also can introduce noise and grain, which can make your image look softer. And in most of my videos, I always recommend to shoot at the lowest ISO you can, ISO 100, 200, or whatever. But once you start getting up into the thousands, you're gonna start introducing noise. So keeping that as low as possible will keep your images looking sharp, crispy, and less noisy. All right, so the third part of the exposure triangle is the most important, in my opinion, when you wanna get sharp photos, and that is shutter speed. Because really what you're doing here is you are controlling motion. And so knowing your shutter speed and how it reacts to whatever it is that you're shooting is the most important thing. If you're shooting something still, like a landscape that's moving very slowly or very quickly, because we're moving thousands of miles an hour through space, that's beside the point. Nothing really in that frame is moving too quick, and so you can have a slower shutter speed and you're not gonna have motion blur, and we're gonna get into that in a minute. Shutter speed is the speed at which your shutter opens and closes to allow light to hit the sensor and gather information. The slower the shutter speed, the more light it's gonna let in and allow for more motion blur to occur, while a faster shutter speed stops motion in its tracks, but it's also gonna let in less light. So the shutter speed controls light and motion. And you'll probably need to find that balance between a fast enough shutter speed to stop the motion you want to stop, but a slow enough shutter speed to have the light that you want without having to bump up your ISO and introducing noise. That's usually the battle. Like I said, knowing what those other two elements are doing is important. And the easy way to learn this, if you are new to photography, this is probably the best way to do it, is if you have a camera that has TV mode, or S if you're on a different camera, that means shutter priority. And that means that you get to control the shutter speed, and the camera is gonna do the thinking about the other two things that we talked about, the aperture and the ISO. And that way you can at least start controlling one variable, and that's gonna allow you to make that decision. Oh, I need a faster shutter speed because I need to stop this motion. The camera will take care of the rest. Boom. And now you're learning how to get those sharp images with less to work. So a lot of blur or softness that comes to an image is due to motion blur, which again, we control with shutter speed. And there's two ends of that spectrum. There's a shutter speed that you need to think about when you are hand holding a camera, because your body is gonna have natural motion to it, and what's on the other side of the lens, what you're shooting and how fast the subject is moving, if they are at all. One easy way that I remember how fast I need the shutter speed to be when I'm hand holding an image at a bare minimum is you never want to have your shutter speed slower than your focal length. Stick with me here. But if you see a number on your camera, so like this one is a 16 millimeter, technically I could shoot this at 1/116 shutter speed and get a sharp image. But what I like to do is double or triple that number.
Says who? Says me. Oh yeah? Yeah! I double dare you. I triple dog dare you.
And what that's gonna do is it is going to ensure that your image is sharp, because you've got more than enough and you are compensating for any movement that you might have. If the wind blows or whatever, you're ready. And so if you're shooting on a 50 millimeter, that means you're shooting at least 1/100 shutter speed or 1/150. So that is to compensate for your movement. Easy one to remember. Double or triple your focal length. Now on the other side of the lens, if you're shooting something slower, or if you're shooting action sports where it's fast and you need something really fast, now that is the other side. And you're gonna need to figure out, okay, I need to stop this motion and they are moving extremely fast. You might have a shutter speed up of 2000, and that's typically where I have mine when I'm shooting action sports in broad daylight. Now the other day I did a shoot out during sunset, so the light was a little bit lower, and I just lower my shutter speed just a little bit. I was under 1000, I was right around 800 to still stop motion, but to get a crispy shot. And so finding that balance, that's what it's all about. All this stuff that I'm talking about, I'm actually going to leave in a PDF cheat sheet in the description below that you can download, and you can keep it on your phone, keep it as an image if you want, and just refer to it as you're learning, and hopefully you find it helpful. But once you learn how to control motion and you figure out the effect that you want and the look that you want, that's where you can really start having fun and you can get creative with it. And so you can purposely have motion blur to your image. If you're tracking a fast vehicle and you want that vehicle in focus, but everything else is blurred, that's a cool way to use motion blur and still have the car or the vehicle, the boat, whatever, sharp. Same thing with a landscape. If you've got a waterfall or a river in the shot, you want that river flowing, you want to see motion blur of the river, but the rocks or the surroundings is sharp. And that's when you have a slow shutter speed and a really high aperture. So learning how to balance all this is really what it comes down to, and that is how you're gonna get sharp images. And I can't believe I'm already this far into the video. How did you guys let me ramble on? If you're still here, thank you. Leave this video a thumbs up. It really helps out my channel. And if you're still here, that means maybe you like it. I don't know. Focus. You can have all the right shutter speed, aperture, everything you want. But if you miss focus, you're gonna have a soft image. So tons of cameras have great focusing systems these days, and just learning how to use those systems to your advantage, knowing how they respond, knowing how to work them, or if you're shooting manual focus, just getting good at it and nailing that focus is gonna make your images pop, look so sharp because you're focused on exactly what you need to be focused on. For example, when you're shooting portraits, if someone's turned slightly, you always want to focus on the closest eye to the camera, not their nose, not their chin, their eye. And that's just because humans look in the eye. And if you're off, it feels off. The image, the whole thing feels off. So focus on the eyes. Just nailing focus on whatever it is that you want to focus on is going to really help your photos pop. And I know that's basic, but it had to be said because here's something deep to think about. Your camera's always focused on something. It's not that it's out of focus. It's focused on something. It just may not be what you want. All right, so on that note, I think it is time to end this video. And like I said a few minutes ago, thank you guys so much for watching. If you made it this far, I appreciate you. You rock. See you in another video. If you guys want to learn more about photography, videography, stuff like this on a more basic level or on a more advanced level, leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. Hopefully this video helps you guys in some way, shape, or form. And I look forward to seeing you guys in another video.